This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
We bring you the details on the latest efforts by African countries to fight COVID-19. Zimbabwe extends lockdown as food shortages bite. On Earth Day 2020, conservationists say human quarantine is proving beneficial to the environment. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. I'll be with you for the next hour. But joining me for the latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. Exxaro Resources plans to take South Africa's state power utility to court over coal supply deals. And the Nigerian naira falls to its lowest level against the dollar in 3 years. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Uche. We'll see you in a bit. We begin with the latest on COVID-19 from across the globe. Confirmed cases are approaching 2.6 million. More than 170,000 people have died. The United States has seen a surge of more than 38,000 new cases in the past day. Total cases there top 820,000. That's nearly a third of the world's total. Around half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the hardest hit. Spain is the second country to surpass 200,000 cases. Turkey is now a hotspot. Its total infections have surpassed 95,000. The Chinese mainland confirmed 30 new infections on Tuesday. 23 of them were people returning from abroad. The other 7 were local transmissions in Heilongjiang province. Well, Africa has reported more than 24,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus infection. Over 6,000 people have recovered. Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa have each recorded above 3,000 cases. Algeria, on the other hand, has recorded the highest number of deaths so far on the continent. Of Africa's 54 countries, only 2, the Comores and Lesotho, have yet to report a case of the virus. While experts have warned of a rise in cases, some countries like Ghana, Madagascar, and Burkina Faso have relaxed restrictions. They say this is meant to ease pressure on the economy and alleviate the negative impact on the more vulnerable. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe has extended a national lockdown to May the 3rd. However, efforts to restrict movement and social contact have been hampered by food shortages that led to some people flouting the rules. People in long queues for scarce maize flour often become rowdy, and police have had to be called in. Farai Mokotuya reports.
Less than 48 hours after President Emmerson Mnangagwa extended a nationwide lockdown, hundreds are packed in a queue for mealie meal. There's no social distancing here as survival instincts kick in.
There is no food left at home, and that's why I'm here. I cannot afford to do social distancing. If I do, my children will starve.
Asked if he's not afraid of catching the coronavirus, his response illustrates the dire food security situation many find themselves in.
It is better to die from an illness than to die of hunger.
During the course of our interview, word comes from the front of the line that the mealie meal is finished. There's disbelief mixed with anger.
The shop staff need to explain how it ran out when only a few people managed to buy. Where did it all go?
After anger and frustration comes desperation, and that's what's kept these people here, milling around outside the store, hoping against hope that they'll be told a few more bags have been found. The staple mealie meal is in short supply, owing to successive droughts that have slashed grain harvests, while soaring inflation has seen the prices of other basic goods consistently go up. All that was before COVID-19 and the restrictions it brought, which have driven up the numbers of the vulnerable. In response, the government will pay out 200 Zimbabwe dollars, the equivalent of $8 to $1 million of them.
I know it's not adequate, but it will go a long way to assist the vulnerability and the food constraints that families continue to face. We have also approached the Treasury with a request to review the payment from 200 to 600, and I'm still awaiting feedback.
The increase may still not ease the shortages, so many here will be pushed to defy the rules and risk their health in order to get through the lockdown. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
On to Somalia now, where authorities are under pressure to address an increase in the number of deaths related to COVID-19. This comes after 6 people died in the past 24 hours, while the numbers of those infected rose to 286. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports.
Bashir Qasim is one of several patients at this government-designated treatment center for COVID-19. Qasim says he contracted the virus earlier this month at his place of work. Inside the hospital, doctors are checking his health status after showing signs of recovery.
It initially began as a cold. Therefore, I went into self-quarantine and restricted my contact with people. After that, I began struggling to breathe, and after several checkups that came negative, I finally came to Martini Hospital to be tested for COVID-19. I feel better now, and I'm waiting for 2 negative tests before I'm fully discharged.
More than a dozen cases are receiving treatment at this facility, with a similar number confirmed dead in the past few days. The government says a majority had underlying health conditions. Health officials in Somalia say they have noted a spike in community transmission of the virus, with Mogadishu now declared the epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic in the country.
We are witnessing a spike in numbers. Therefore, it is our responsibility to ensure we have many quarantine and treatment facilities. We are in the process of establishing a second treatment unit at the Benadir Hospital in case we need more capacity to handle a high number of cases emanating from Martini Hospital. We are also hoping to get more hospitals as we increase our preparedness.
Puntland, a semi-autonomous region in northeastern Somalia, is the latest to confirm positive cases. Authorities there say the patient is a 33-year-old male with no recent travel history. And in Somaliland, the autonomous region not far from Puntland has also recorded several COVID-19 cases, with up to $3 million set aside to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, here in Mogadishu, authorities have announced a suspension in the issuance of burial permits. Instead, it wants tests conducted on recent deaths to confirm whether they're attributed to COVID-19. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
After weeks of sensitizing citizens to comply with the COVID-19 lockdown, Nigeria has begun prosecution of offenders via mobile court. Hundreds of offenders in the country's capital, Abuja, have already been convicted and sentenced to a fine, community service, or even a short jail term. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalama brings us that report.
These are defaulters of the COVID-19 lockdown order serving their sentence. A day of sweeping the streets of Abuja. Major cities in Nigeria have been on lockdown for nearly 4 weeks, part of government's effort to curb the spread of COVID-19. Movement is restricted to only people in essential services like healthcare workers, food processing and production outfits, and media. Although the compliance level has been high, many citizens are seen to flout the stay-at-home order.
If we close school, close mosques, close market, close churches, close every gathering just to keep people at home, and they're not coming out in their thousands to come and jog, the purpose is defeated. It's very, very much defeated, because even those who are coming out to jog don't even wear enough clothes. Sometimes you don't even know who is touching you. Anybody who comes there claims to be a trainer. You give them your body to touch, to exercise your leg, your shoulder, and whatever. That's very risky here. We are doing that, and most of them in coming days will be facing mobile court in very large number.
More than 240 violators have been arraigned and convicted within the city.
Ordinarily, when convicted, the persons are meant to serve some form of sentence as a punishment. But what is being done here, probably to give human face, and the bulk of the persons are people who will tell you they are going out to buy food or look for money. So what they are made to do is to pay 1,000 as a fine. And also, you can see the streets around here is clean. The streets have been cleaned up by persons who have been found and convicted and sentenced to have violated the regulation. So the measures taken now, which we hope will deter others who are seeing what is happening, is to compel them to do this community service.
Asked me if I had any ID card of movement, so I said no. We should adhere to what the government have said, because definitely the government is also trying to help the communities because of the sickness. We don't have to disobey. The only problem people are having is that they were not quite aware that this is going to happen, so that they can prepare themselves to have things at home to eat.
The court is still lenient with the sentencing at this time. No offender has been jailed so far. The task force says it will continue to appeal and sensitize residents while enforcing the law. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
New York has been the epicenter of America's fight against COVID-19. A Nigerian doctor based there has recovered from the virus, and he spoke to us about his experience and the situation in the U.S. state.
It was a dream to come to New York. It was a dream to practice here. Well, it is a dream, and that's why I'm passionate about what I'm doing. It breaks my heart. Everything suddenly becomes an apocalypse. It was scary. It is scary.
All New Yorkers working right now, all essential workers deserve personal protective equipment. Essential workers across New York City are dying.
At some point, I just step out of the ICU and I'm just like, I took off my PPEs, take everything carefully. I just bend down. I'm like, how long am I going to go on with this? And it's the same thing across board for all the doctors here. If I don't come out smiling, if I don't smile, I'm going to, I don't know.
More of our co-workers will die. And when they die, the chain is broken.
I think this is a test of how mentally resilient we are as doctors. You would break down if you are not, if you don't find a positive, if you don't know how to cope in situations like this. We have to call families, like I said, every time. Like a number of bad news I've delivered in this period, where you deliver this amount of bad news like over this period. So imagine every time having to call and say, hey, I'm sorry, you lost your son. I'm sorry, you lost your father. My understanding of disease is different as a doctor. People out there think you get it, you're dead. In fact, when I got better, when everything had cleared and everything was fine, and I called my mom, I'm like, hey, Mom, did you know at some point I got the coronavirus? She lost it. Beautiful day. This is like wildfire. It goes around and it kills, you know. And people ask me, should I take lime? Should I take hot water? Should I take tea? Will this help me? And stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, I don't know if it works or does not work. I believe that whatever is going to make you, whether faith, whether exercise, whether diet, whatever you think would give you that effect that would make you think you can fight this, you should do it. It's a disease that we are trying to understand because we are learning about the facts. We don't have enough facts. And I personally, in my own faith or belief, I believe where facts fail or where fact stops is where God begins.
Benin maintains that it is not in a position to impose a lockdown in the country due to the coronavirus. This is because about 50 to 65% of that population in the country makes a living in the informal sector. President Patrice Talon has said that a lockdown would cause more suffering to citizens. Government measures already in place include the closure of cultural and religious sites and events. The closure of schools has also been extended until the 10th of May. The country has so far reported 54 cases of COVID-19 and 1 death.
The vast majority of Beninese have no wage income. How many people in Benin have a monthly salary? And who can wait 2, 3, 4, or even 5 weeks without working and live on a monthly income?
We can't stay home for 21 days. It's already too much. Even for 1 day, we can't because we haven't planned anything. We depend on the money we earn daily.
The response needs to be adapted, taking into account the economic context of the country, the social-cultural context, the environment, and our knowledge of the pandemic. I think that the fact that the Beninese government has set up a cordon around the main cities where cases have been detected is good enough.
Algerians are bracing for a challenging Muslim holy month of Ramadan due to begin on Thursday. The spread of the coronavirus has caused economic challenges for some families and has kept others apart. Meanwhile, the government has also announced an extension of the lockdown to the 29th of April. This now means that large gatherings typically held throughout Ramadan might not take place.
The spirit of Ramadan is missing this year. May God grant us strength and help us to get through this. The only thing I really miss this Ramadan is my children's visit. They are now in London and can't travel to Algeria.
I lost my job and have no income. I don't know what to do this Ramadan with my kids. I will buy enough food necessities for the first few days, but then we'll have nothing for the rest of the month this year. We're also going to spend this Ramadan alone at home. We can't visit each other, so we all must stay in our homes.
2 Chinese companies have donated medical supplies to a foundation initiated by Zimbabwe's First Lady. The contributions were made by Huawei and Sichuan PG Times. They include 50,000 surgical masks, 510 protective suits, and 1,000 pairs of medical goggles. The supplies are to be distributed by the Angel of Hope Foundation to health workers on the front lines of the anti-pandemic efforts in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has commended China for assisting in the fight against COVID-19. China says it will continue supporting anti-pandemic measures.
The President is on the forefront of this COVID-19 program. He knows where this is going to be because he has also formed a task force which involves so many ministers who are in line with working with COVID-19. And they know where the need is. And this is going to be channeled to those people so that we see the whole country being covered and to see that our frontline staff are all happy and are doing their work protected.
For 40 years, China and Zimbabwe have been marching together hand in hand against all kinds of the difficulties. China stands ready to continue to assist Zimbabwe in this fight as best as we can. I have no doubt we're going to emerge from this pandemic victorious and stronger, and our friendship further cemented.
The COVID-19 pandemic comes at a crucial and unstable time for Sudan. Even before the pandemic hit, the country's economy had already been struggling. And now, in the face of the new coronavirus, hospitals are short of medical supplies. Tuli Shabalala reports.
Following the fall of Omar al-Bashir's regime a year ago, Sudan's once robust healthcare system is struggling to emerge from years of corruption and mismanagement. Khartoum has increased its health budget by 200%. But they still need $120 million to fight the coronavirus. And another $150 million to cover the country's supply of medicines until June.
We hope we don't reach a point where we have to open squares, large halls, and large camps for people, like many other countries have done when the infected cases have increased. But we may also reach that point.
Sudan's leaders have enforced a 3-week lockdown to curb the spread of the virus. The health ministry plans to prepare 1,433 beds for COVID-19 patients. There are only 300 ventilators available for a population of around 40 million.
We have inherited a completely collapsed healthcare system from the previous regime. As such, any efforts to contain the COVID-19 will be a huge problem. Infrastructure is weak and the medical staff suffers from great shortages. Education and awareness will be the first in the fight against the virus and will greatly help to contain the spread of COVID-19.
The European Union and the United States have pledged $13.7 million to aid Sudan's coronavirus efforts. And shipments of medical supplies have arrived, courtesy of Chinese billionaire Jack Ma. This will go a long way to help Sudan's containment of the COVID-19. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Before the COVID-19 outbreak in Tanzania, Dr. Mariam Rani's pediatric practice did not conduct online telemedicine calls with patients. However, since the new coronavirus hit the country about a month ago, Dr. Nurani and other doctors at the Aga Khan Hospital are turning to technology to make their work safer and easier. CGTN's Daniel Kijo brings us that story.
A computer with a webcam or a cell phone equipped with a camera. That's all that's needed for an online medical consultation. Virtually. Something the Aga Khan Hospital started after COVID-19 hit Tanzania about a month ago. Dr. Mariam says the system is helping her treat her patients.
A lot of our kids were missing appointments because parents don't want to expose them to the healthcare environment. So based on this, we thought this was the right time to venture out into doing telemedicine to make sure everybody gets the healthcare they deserve, but in the comfort of their homes.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit Tanzania, the government has issued strict directives to try and stop the spread of the disease. Most include limiting any activity that involves large groups of people. Susie Muhana has been using the system to get pediatric consultations from Dr. Mariam during this period. She says the system has given her peace of mind.
I find this online consultation with the doctor to be very helpful, especially for us mothers. Sometimes we just panic and we just don't know what to do and we just want to go to the hospital, and maybe it's not something very serious.
About 40 doctors at the hospital use the system. The management has rolled it out to pediatrics, internal medicine, gynecology, and cardiology departments. Despite its advantages during the COVID-19 era, telemedicine is not yet a complete replacement for in-person appointments. Medical professions have long hailed the potential of the internet to allow doctors to treat people in rural communities remotely, but they say it's only now that it's really taking off. However, it faces challenges like its limited nature and lack of insurance cover. Insurance companies are reluctant to provide cover as it is a new service to the market. Despite this, Dr. Mariam says it could be here to stay.
As everybody feels, life after Corona probably will not be the same. A lot will have changed. We have realized during this time that there's a lot we can do from home and from distances. So my thought is this will become the new normal. Telemedicine will become the norm even after this period has passed.
Telemedicine might be in the future and could help save millions of lives through virtual consultations. But before the industry gets to that level, it must first prove that it's not just a trend rooted to this COVID-19 crisis. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Active COVID-19 cases have dropped to under 100 for the first time in the Chinese city of Wuhan. The National Health Commission says the city also reported 0 deaths for 7 consecutive days as of Tuesday. The city is getting back to normal. Traffic has resumed and people are gradually returning to work. The city government has rolled out a slew of policies to help university graduates find jobs or start businesses. State-owned enterprises in the city are to allocate at least 60% of their employment quota this year to new college graduates. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises can receive 1,000 yuan, or about $140 in subsidies for each graduate that they employ. Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. More news when we return, including on Earth Day 2020, conservationists say human quarantine is proving beneficial to the environment. Cameroon President Paul Biya admits the military killed civilians back in February.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, at least 40 people are reported to have died in floods in Democratic Republic of Congo's east. Heavy rains pounded Uvira city last week, causing widespread destruction. Initial reports had put the death toll at 23. Our DRC correspondent Chris Ojamringa brings us the latest.
A heavy downpour in the DRC's eastern city of Uvira last Thursday caused a river to burst its banks. The flooding went on for 2 days in the town's densely populated areas and surrounding villages. Troops from the UN peacekeeping mission were called in to support search and rescue teams. The mayor of Uvira says the death toll has now risen to 40, but some civil society organizations say 55 people died in the floods. More than 15,000 homes are reported to have been damaged, and that has left thousands of people homeless. The DRC president says the government will support everyone affected by the disaster. The country has experienced flooding in other provinces as well. Scientists attribute it to climate change. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
In Cameroon, President Paul Biya has admitted that the military massacred 3 women and 10 children in a northwestern village back in February. A statement from the presidency says the bodies will be exhumed for the state to conduct decent burials. 3 soldiers have been already arrested. Meanwhile, villagers have commended President Biya's latest act. The government had first denied it. Lockdowns and reduced economic activity across the world have made the planet a much cleaner place. However, this has come at a price. Thousands of people have lost their lives and others their jobs as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak.
The streets are quiet, factories are closed, and the skies are clear. For years, the world's nations have been fighting to reduce carbon emissions. It took this drastic action to save the planet.
Early modelling in the European Union shows that emissions may fall by 10% against the EU's overall 2020 emissions targets. In China, emissions dropped to lows of 200 million metric tons of CO2, representing on average around 25% decline since the early start of the pandemic. Similarly, emissions in Delhi, India fell by 60% since the outbreak.
Some environmental experts believe that carbon emissions may return to its historical baseline or even exceed it.
The greatest benefit is that more people have learned to live more simply. These new changes in human behavior are consistent with a reduced carbon footprint and climate care. Entrepreneurship, new products, and digital innovations are amongst the other benefits to society at large.
But activists warn that once the lockdowns are lifted, countries will need to invest in systemic changes that accelerate progress in order to continue reducing carbon emissions.
Once this period is over, we're going to see pollution that is worse than what we saw before we were in these specific lockdowns. We can't work as if we are catching up for the time that is lost now, but this is an opportunity for us to actually re-evaluate and see how we can pave a path for a cleaner future.
For example, by working from home and telecommuting, e-education, and reduced consumption patterns. And as a result, greenhouse gas emissions have sunk sharply, providing evidence that dramatic and rapid improvements to air quality and climate change is in fact achievable.
But this victory for climate change comes with trade-offs. the loss of human life, psychological stress, job losses, and contraction of economies.
Humanity has suffered a lot from this virus, and it would be a shame if we were not to learn key lessons on how we can live and coexist in a healthy planet. There's definitely an opportunity for us to think differently.
Environmental activists are urging governments around the world to re-evaluate environmental policies to ensure the benefits we see now are enhanced. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, there are fears that lockdowns are decimating tourism across the continent. As a result, countries are lacking the resources they need to protect the environment.
Award-winning wildlife conservationists and filmmakers Derek and Beverly Jobert have been exploring parts of Africa for over 30 years. The couple has just finished shooting a production in the Mara Plains in Kenya to highlight the survival of several species around the world. The film marks 50 years of Earth Day.
You know, it's really sad that we are in a time where we've all got to face the fact that the coronavirus has debilitated humanity. But isn't it a profound time for us to actually focus why we're here? And it's at a time where we're celebrating Earth Day, but yet we're all in lockdown. So in a way, I do think that it is a time where we're illuminating the past and the past evils.
This has been such a traumatic thing for the world that if we don't come out of it changed or better, then it's been a tremendous wasted opportunity, and we should admonish ourselves. We've had great disasters happen in history and personally, and we come out of it knitted together and better, emotionally, physically, spiritually, rationally, and I hope that would extend to our emotional and ecological intelligence as well. We don't have these moments for nothing. We've got to grow from it.
The lockdowns around the world due to COVID-19 have created a chance to reimagine relations with the natural world. Conservationists say the impact is not all positive.
I'm really worried about tourism collapsing because without it, whole communities suffer. Anti-poaching disappears, and we see a spike in poaching because these vast tracts of land are now vacant because there are no tourists in them. So wouldn't it be great to have all the clean air and the clean water and wildlife numbers relaxing and bird numbers in cities increasing without the economic meltdown downside?
An Africa Union reporter said that the pandemic will cost Africa up to $500 billion. As the crisis batters main sources of revenue, including tourism, it's a mixture of hope and frustration. Conservationists like Derek hope there will be re-engagement with nature once the pandemic ends.
I think that in protected areas, lions are going to do okay. I think a lot of it depends on how we come out of this. Whether it is, as you say, business as usual, going back to shooting these big male lions or not. And really, their future is in our hands, and it hangs in the balance largely based on how we redefine ourselves coming out of this.
Countries like South Africa are already working on a recovery plan. Egypt is working closely with the tourism industry in order to minimize the losses. Chom Rono, CGTN.
Well, I'll be back to bring you the latest in the world of sport. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in business with Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Exxaro Resources plans to take South Africa's state power utility to court over coal supply deals. And Nigeria's Naira falls to its lowest level against the dollar in 3 years.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's power utility Eskom has declared a force majeure on 2 coal supply agreements with Exxaro Resources. Now, the move, however, hasn't gone well with Exxaro, which is one of Eskom's main coal suppliers. The miner says it will take action against the struggling state power utility. Eskom's force majeure will be effective from April 16th until a month after South Africa's COVID-19 lockdown period is completely lifted. Now, this follows a similar instruction to wind power producers 2 weeks ago. Coal mines that supply to Eskom have been operating since the country's lockdown began. But as demand drops, Eskom says it has significant surplus that is generating less revenue for the utility. And staying in South Africa, the government has unveiled its biggest spending plan ever to shore up an economy which has been devastated by the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, according to President Cyril Ramaphosa, around $6 billion of that required $26 billion will be reprioritized from the country's current budget. The remainder will be sourced from international groups such as the IMF and local sources. Of the total spending amount, there will be roughly $11 billion in guarantees for banks to lend, and over $5 billion will be set aside to protect and create jobs. Now, Africa's most industrialized nation also aims to allocate more than $2.5 billion for welfare grants for the poor as well as the unemployed. Well, let's shift focus now to Nigeria. The Nigerian naira fell to its lowest level against the dollar on Tuesday. The currency traded at 420 per dollar on the black market. That is the weakest it has traded since February 2017. Now, the slide came as U.S. oil futures traded in negative territory for the second day. That's after diving below zero for the first time ever on Monday. Nigeria does depend on oil for almost 60% of its revenue and about 90% of its foreign exchange. But as oil prices plunge and demand drops due to the coronavirus pandemic, Africa's biggest economy has been discounting its oil cargoes in order to be able to find buyers. That's a move analysts are saying could hurt its public spending and dollar earnings. Now, staying with aviation matters, African airlines have incurred losses of more than $4 billion since the global outbreak of COVID-19. Nigeria's losses are projected at $170 million by the International Air Transport Association. Key players in the aviation industry are relying on the government for funding and other life support, which of course the sector needs to survive. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reporting.
The global outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic has put the aviation industry through its darkest moments in history. Activities have since ground to a halt following local and international travel bans. The aviation value chain in Nigeria is a huge employer of labor. Service providers like travel agencies, caterers, airport chain stores, taxi operators and aviation fuel suppliers have all shut down. The International Air Transport Association estimates losses of about $170 million, and experts project that could be even worse.
So I think that figure may even be conservative. If this lasts longer, in the first month, we'll probably be losing close to 100 billion naira in losses for the Nigerian aviation sector alone. And probably also be losing in excess of about close to 1 million passenger traffic that perhaps would have flown within this period, within a 1 month period. So it's really going to be huge loss on the aviation sector. Not only the service providers, not only the airlines, government, NAMA, NCAA, FAN alone will lose in excess close to 2 billion naira in passenger service charge and other related services.
The situation has left the industry in dire need of support to overcome the crisis. Key players are looking to government for funding, loans and tax reliefs. So far, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced a $130 million funding facility to the aviation sector.
The CBN has promised to raise that particular facility, I think by another 100 billion or thereabout. The federal government has also announced plans to also interface with experts in the aviation industry to see the extent of loss and how they can come in to mitigate some of these losses. So on the federal government side, we've not seen the extent of that commitment yet until that happens, until the meeting happens and then they announce their level of palliative. So we can't really assess how that will impact them going forward. But again, like the facility at the CBN, yes, if they access that, it could really help them maybe keep some jobs, and also be able to service the aircraft.
Nigeria's aviation industry contributed 0.14% to the economy in 2019, up from 0.12% in the previous year. Full recovery of the industry is projected to happen around 2020. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, ratings agency Moody's has placed Tunisia on review for a downgrade as the country faces weak near-term growth. That's amid the coronavirus pandemic. Tunisia's central bank, which has a B2 rating and is responsible for the repayment of the government bonds, is also on review for a possible downgrade. CGTN's Adnan Shaushi examines what the decision means for the North African nation.
Analysts maintain that Moody's decision to place Tunisia's ratings on review for downgrade shows the lack of confidence in the North African country's economic stability and its capacity in dealing with the negative impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
Moody's is clearly giving Tunisia 3 months to prove that it's capable of redressing economic indicators and limiting the factors of coronavirus crisis. The repercussions are the whole world, not just Tunisia. The crisis is unescapable, even after the designated period.
The editor-in-chief of Albursa.com, Tunisia's top economic and financial analysis platform, adds that the country's external financing options are very limited.
Tunisia relies on external funding sources. This will be problematic on the international market because the funding rate will be around at least 9%. It's impossible for Tunisia to seek such an affordable financing because the 2020 complementary state budget and expenses will be much higher than expected.
The Finance Commission at the House of the People's Representatives has shed light on Moody's evaluation of the situation in Tunisia.
The situation is alarming. The economic slowdown in the whole world does not help Tunisia reach its objectives. Implementing the necessary economic and social reforms is costly. Some of the resources which were dedicated to reform and development are used in fighting the pandemic. We don't even know how or when it ends.
Moody's statement also reads that a downgrade would be likely if there were delays in the availability of or marked increase in the cost of external funding or a significantly more severe deterioration in Tunisia's fiscal and debt metrics. Analysts maintain that the current crisis will hit the pillars of the Tunisian economy, especially the tourism, export and service sectors. Authorities say they are acting in a proactive way so as to introduce a package of mid-term reforms designed to support the national economy in the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And to the international front, Venezuela was the world's third biggest producer of oil. Now, CGTN's Stephen Gibbs now explores how the oil-rich Latin American nation is paying pretty much the price following the recent crash in benchmark crude futures.
Venezuela depends on oil. It has the largest reserves in the world, and the resource provides at least 90% of its export income. That dependency was revealed in a bad way in 2014. A fall in the global price of oil helped expose an underlying economy that was riven with inefficiency. The country's been in deep recession ever since. Now, with US sanctions and the coronavirus pandemic, There is speculation that a new low point is approaching. One sign of that is the gasoline queues in this oil-rich country. Last month, President Maduro warned that the oil price slump, it was then at $24 a barrel, was a brutal blow to the economy. He called for international efforts to stabilize prices.
I proposed the need to resume the dialogues within the OPEC Plus framework to move towards objective, achievable agreements for the gradual, progressive, sustained recovery of the oil market and the price of oil.
In the 1950s, Venezuela was the world's third biggest producer of oil.
As we headed out into the lake,
It's sometimes cited as a textbook example of what's called the resource curse, where nations that have abundant resources often fall into inefficiency and corruption. There have been attempts to diversify. The Maduro government relies quite heavily on exports of gold, though much of that is mined illegally, and it's also sanctioned by the United States. So is there any way out?
The fiscal deficit will increase. The only way it can be reduced is by going to the central bank. But we Venezuelans have plenty of experience of what happens to an economy when you have no growth and finance a fiscal gap by increasing the money supply.
Venezuela has the world's highest inflation. Last year it touched over 2 million%. That rate had slowed in recent months. The fear is now it will rise sharply. Meanwhile, ordinary Venezuelans look set once again to pay the real price for events beyond their control. Stephen Gibbs, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll bring you more analysis of South Africa's stimulus package, which will of course help cushion the effects of COVID-19. Well, that's all for now. Join us top of the hour. It's back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. Well, let's take a look at what's coming up in your sports news after the break. Rwandese club APR eyeing a group stage appearance in the CAF Champions League.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's time now for your sport news. Football in Rwanda has grown immensely over the past few years. The national team has made 3 African Nations Championships finals in a row, inspiring the country's record league winners, APR, to aim for CAF Champions League group stage qualification for the first time. CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar tells us more.
Rwanda's most decorated football club, APR, has won 17 league titles, 8 domestic cups and 3 regional Kagame Interclub Cups in their glittering history. However, success on the continental scene has eluded them, and at the beginning of the 2019-2020 season, the Kigali Giants made a huge statement by securing the services of Moroccan tactician Adel Erad Mohammed. This is the man they hope will deliver them CAF Champions League football.
My coaching staff and I are very happy to be here in Rwanda, working with APR Football Club, such a reputable team. We are very much aware of the demands that come with big clubs all over Africa, particularly with APR. As we all know, they've won pretty much everything there is to win here. And when we took this job, the objectives were very clear: to win the league, the domestic cup, and most importantly, to qualify for the CAF Champions League group stages next season.
It did not take too long for the Moroccan to settle in. His instant impact has seen APR play free-flowing football this season and are yet to lose a match after 23 rounds. The team has also had more players getting picked for the national team.
I'm really proud and happy with their development. They've improved so much in a short period of time. I'm glad to see that my players are not only important for APR, but for the national team as well. My staff and I will continue doing our job, and we are happy if it helps the national team in any way.
Erad, who has also worked with Moroccan giants Raja Casablanca, also feels that participation in continental club football will play a huge role for Rwandan football to scale the heights.
I think if Rwandan clubs can at least make the group stage of the CAF Confederations Cup or even the Champions League, it will be great. This will play a massive contribution to the development of Rwandan players, and it will eventually go on to make the national team become better in the coming years.
For the players, playing in the lucrative stages of the CAF Champions League will provide them a shop window to market themselves to top clubs.
I think it will be another motivation to push us forward into the next stage, winning the league and also in the club Champions League. I think it's another motivation. That's a platform that one can use to get an opportunity outside of the country, because many teams are looking for players outside.
APR hold a 6-point lead at the top of the league table with 7 matches to go before the league was suspended due to the coronavirus pandemic as they gun for their 18th title. However, Champions League football will remain their main focus when action returns. Mohamed Abubakar for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
We cross over to Europe, where Moroccan Hakim Ziyech may have played his last game for Ajax after a directive by the state to suspend all sporting activities until